Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We checked out Tekker's Cfern last week and I got a few requests or suggestions, I suppose, to check out an acoustic cover of it, which I gotta say, that is intriguing. It is a song to me that is exceptionally electronic in the way that a lot of it feels almost algorithmic. I don't think I ever got a direct answer if any of it is, or if most of the track was humanly placed by hand, or if there was some sort of process algorithm at play on it. Um, Knowing Tekker, though, it probably is all done by hand, but still translating that to live instrument performance rather than hitting play on the sound file or just distributing it. It just sounds bonkers to me because I could barely find a pattern in it at all. It was just a weird track that sits far outside the realms of typical music, which makes it interesting, but also makes it difficult to play. So when I found out there was an acoustic version from Alarm Will Sounds, y'all know I had to check that out. That's what we're going to be diving into today. Usually I would put up, who requested and stuff, but it was from quite a few people, so I'm not going to worry about it. Just know that I certainly saw all like 5 or 6 requests for this, and you got my attention. Let's dive in and see what Alarm Will Sound is doing with Cfern. Does that vocalization going on in the background? Of course it's gone now. Yeah, this is really interesting. We don't have the timbre variety, so I'm focusing more on the music than the sound of it. Yeah, pretty straightforward 4/4 here. Yeah, they push against it so hard for that polyrhythm. There are tempo changes, sometimes smooth retardandos, accelerandos, but sometimes abrupt tempo shifts as well. Loving the auxiliary percussion here. We got a güiro off to the... We got a lot of sounds everywhere. A lot of ribbed wood or plastic stuff. I mean, the güiro is the first thing that comes to mind, but not all of these are güiro sounds. Like that right there, that's something else. I don't know the name of it. I'll see if I can find a picture though. Little triangle every once in a while. That's neat. Ooh. Yeah, that was very neat. Primarily because it's interesting. They found their own way to introduce a lot of timbre. I don't know how many people are in this group. There are a lot of instruments that are played for specific sections and then never brought back. I could imagine that 5 or 6 people maybe could play all of this. Jumping from instrument, they'd have to be multi-talented as far as instrumentation goes. But honestly, I think as long as you stick within a mouthpiece style, reeded, even double reeded, brass mouthpiece, and then percussion, the crossover is pretty easy. But no, because like sometimes, well, no, because the trumpet, when the trumpet came in, it was playing with the sax. Yeah, I think you could assign one person to a family of instruments and end up not needing the 20 or so people that this sounds like it would require. You could probably pull this off 5 or 6. Um, but so they, like, okay, so here's the thing. Autechre creates timbre variety through sonic augmentation, tweaking frequency and pitch and all sorts of other variables on sounds digitally. They might only have a single drum sound for the drum pattern that sits at the forefront of this track, but they tweak parameters as the song goes on, and we hear this one drum idea presented in a variety of different sounds. The same is true for ornamental and background instruments like the piano that was in that track. Again, it's one instrument or maybe two instruments, if maybe they have a second piano-esque sound, that they tweak the parameters on to shift the way that it sounds and create different timbres that way. It's more of a smooth timbre journey where the sound itself is never really jumping between specific sounds, it's slowly evolving over the course of the track. The smorgasbord of voices that you might hear for any given instrument is a conglomeration of micro adjustments throughout the track. Here, our timbre variety is more direct. There is no subtle variation between sounds. We move from these types of instruments to these types of instruments, usually in segments. There's about 3 parts to this track that I heard as far as what instruments are playing. They tend to move with each other. That's not always true. Sometimes there's a little bleed over where like two of the instruments will stop, two more will come in, and then like a couple bars later, a third instrument from the old passage will drop and they'll bring a new instrument in. This is that instrument hopping concept I was talking about, and why I think this is probably played by only a handful of people rather than a full orchestra. Although it could very well be played by a full orchestra, and a lot of people are just sitting there with, 50 bars of rest at a time. It's quite possible to do it that way as well. I don't know anything about alarmal sounds, so I don't know what our personnel list looks like. Um, but yeah, so it's not a gradual evolution of a couple of instruments, it is the presence and passing of the baton through multiple instruments. The timbre changes are more sudden, but what that does for me is create stark contrast points. And it really helped me listen to the song in a drastically different way, which allowed me to focus on aspects of it that I had a tough time with the way that Autechre did it. And I think it's really neat listening to it both ways because they both had me looking at it through different perspectives, and I have a very full idea of the song now that I didn't have previously. Particularly, I want to look at rhythm. This was the thing that really threw me off last time. I found it really difficult to keep track of time signature or tempo with Autechre's version. It seemed random at all times. I never knew where I was, and I never felt on solid ground. My grasp on what was happening was non existent. Here, the whole song's in 4/4. I don't think that there's much of a contention to that at all. It certainly plays around a lot with polyrhythmic ideas, very rarely polymetric, which I think is interesting. A majority of the ideas that I listened to were all contained into one bar of 4/4. As much as they pushed against it, they never took the idea over the bar line. And so being able to hear the drum kit as an instrument, a static instrument throughout the entire track, with the addition, I think, of occasional backbeats. They weren't always present, but sometimes the drummer would put the metronome in a hi-hat. Sometimes the snare would be on every other beat. And it's not always necessary that this was the time signature or the tempo. This very well could have been another polyrhythm against what was intended by Autechre, but the end result is that many of these sections I could feel a 4/4 whether it was implied by some instrument or not. And it makes me think that this track is, to put it in metal terms, or I think a lot of us have more of a censoring at, it's Meshuggah. It doesn't sound like 4/4 at any given time, really, but it is all 4/4. The big difference being that Meshuggah loves to play with polymeter, whereas this track plays around with polyrhythm. And again, the big difference is, do the rhythms get contained into one bar, or do they break over into the next bar and kind of defeat the 4/4 itself? And it really is because of the timbre change, or I suppose the lack of timbre change, that allowed me to hear that. Like I said, there are some moments where I lay down the beat. I don't remember that too often in the past one, but it still gets really funky when they do tempo shifts, and then they don't provide you with the metronome anywhere in it, and you got to figure that one out for yourself. Where is our 4/4? Honestly, in all the cases, I could still find an invisible 4/4, an unspoken 4/4. And more importantly, I didn't hear any idea of groupings of 3 or 7 or anything like that either to suggest that maybe I'm finding a 4/4 that isn't intended. That is to say that I can't find an intended time signature in most of this, and I found an unspoken 4/4 in a lot of it, which doesn't mean that the whole song is in 4/4, but that if I wanted to, I could and probably would transpose it into 4/4 if I were going to do that. And transposition is just taking a song and putting it into paper, sheet music. And I find that really interesting. Just the whole concept of having a clearer time signature, even if it isn't expressly stated in the track, because that was something I had no concept of in the electronic sound. And the only thing I can think of is the timbre. Changing the timbre, or actually not changing the timbre, gives me something static to cling on to. Now, they also did something else different here, which I am a huge fan of: melody. Well, melody is the wrong word. Harmony might be the word I want. Non-percussive sounds. There's a lot more of them in this one. As far as Autechre's version, if I remember correctly, it was piano and drums and some ornamental stuff sometimes, but the piano was sort of just by itself doing its thing. And here, I think they wrote in new lines. The harmonic and melodic ideas are wider and more stacked than I remember for Autechre's version. But I think more importantly isn't just that they've expanded the harmonic elements of it, but that they have this trading off idea where in the original a single piano would play all of the lines, and in this one they're passed off between instruments. Maybe the saxophone will take it for this bar, but on the repetition we'll give it to the trumpet, something like that. And what this does is it creates contrast, which allows me to find structure more easily. When everything comes from one voice, it's difficult to find the differentiations in them unless there's vast differences. Throwback here to the Hilary Hahn track that we checked out um, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, um, where I was talking about how disjointed it was, where she was moved from her higher notes to her lower notes to create a harmonic bed and then play the melody and come back to the bed and play a melody. And that pitch contrast was enough to separate those two lines from me despite coming from the same instrument. And that doesn't happen with Autechre's Cfern, where the piano is in the same range with the same execution, the same articulation. The only difference is we're kind of playing all these different ideas in the same area, and they all sound similar and begin to bleed into one another. And the opposite happens here. We're ripping this apart, we're exposing the different elements of it, and it creates something that sounds harmonically interesting to me. The piano felt like an afterthought in Autechre's version, subjectively. Maybe other people don't hear it that way, but I did. To me, the core aspect was the rhythm, the percussive element, playing around with time. right? That was my big draw to it. The piano just sort of was there. And this is the opposite. This feels more traditionally constructed where the rhythm sits underneath of the harmony and melody, and while it is still complex in its own right, it is still a foundational element to something else. It's the inverse of how Autechre built their track. And in this inversion, I found a song that resonated a bit better with me. This song took me on a journey that Autechre's didn't. I mentioned that all of my interest in Autechre's version was from an academic area, trying to break it down, trying to figure out what time signature it's in, what kind of polymetric ideas they have at play, um, the entire audio engineering side of things. It's nothing I would ever listen to, but if it were given to me as an assignment in university, hey, break this down, tell me what's happening. Yeah, I mean, here's what it is. It kind of feels like a word problem for a music class, right? You know, math has word problems. That's kind of what it feels like to me. It really tasks you with having a strong understanding of all of the aspects out on it and asks you to figure it out, you know, complete the puzzle, figure out what's happening in it. You have to really understand what's going on, though. And the same thing is with, you know, math word problems. You have to know what you're looking for, disregard irrelevant information. You got to have a strong grasp on the topics at hand. But this feels like a song to me. Again, we're moving into highly subjective territory here. I'm not saying Autechre's version isn't a song or that it's only worth this through exercise. Um, but this one, I can connect with it. It feels like something that is more than just interesting on a theoretical level. This to me feels like avant-garde classical. And I think that's even more interesting because that's a genre I typically don't enjoy. Avant-garde is very hit and miss, and this is hit for me. I love the patterns and the shapes that all of the pitches create, all the different timbres, the way that they bounce off of each other and play around each other, and even more specifically, sometimes they do pick ones that are a bit similar so they can blend a bit better, and in other cases, they'll pick two timbres that are wildly different from each other as to create this sonic divide between our harmonic instruments. The percussion element is interesting in a way of keeping the song driving forward. If I want to focus on it, there's a lot of real neat things going on, and I can certainly learn from it. But if I don't want to, it sits nicely in the background of this driving forward momentum for the harmonies to sit on top of, all the melodic devices. And I'm using melodic devices a bit roughly. I'm not going to say that there's a strong melody in here, but there are melodic components. Um, so yeah, just for anybody who is looking to catch me on a technicality, I'm going to continue to call them melodic devices, but I wouldn't say there's a strong sense of melody in here. But the way that they build up over time and the way that we shift instrumentation, it feels like a journey that the original didn't. In a sense, this feels, getting into the subjective again, this feels passionate. This feels musical. The other one feels sterile. It feels technical. It feels uh, cerebral, whereas this one feels emotive. And you know, on paper, they're the same song. It's the execution, it's the sonic ideas, it's what instrument you're bringing to the table, it's how you're arranging them. You know, this is something I talked about on Yaba. Was that the artist? We checked out a live recording, and I said, I think I even put it on the thumbnail, that um, Okay, well, I'll link it right there. The Yeba. I don't remember the name of the track, but I'm pretty sure the artist was Yeba. I had mentioned that I just blanked out on the name of the job. The arrangement is such an important job. Anytime that you're going to translate one idea to another, whether you're taking an electronic song and putting it to an orchestra, or taking a metal track and doing an acoustic version, or taking a pop track and expanding it into, an orchestra, whatever you're doing, if you take one idea and convert it to another one that has different instrumentation, the arranger's job is so important. It's make or break. What's on the paper is solid. How it is translated to the new form is not. It's a blank canvas. Well, not really a blank canvas. You know what you're writing, but you can still take it in any direction. You can still get real weird with it, or real wrong with it in a way that completely breaks everything that the original did well. Um, and I think this is just a really strong case of arranging for not just a different set of instrumentation, but a different goal entirely. And I really connect with this interpretation of it, not because it's better than our techers, but because they had a different execution in mind and they went after and achieved that at such a high level. And I love the little flourishes they add to it. Speaking of flourishes, before we wrap this up, at the end we have a smorgasbord of auxiliary percussion items coming into play. A lot of them are ribbed wood or plastic instruments. I mentioned the güiro. There's quite a few moments in here where I'm like, yep, that is certainly a güiro. Let me see if I can pull up a picture of this real quick. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I have heard 4 different pronunciations over the course of my life, and I'm not really sure which one is right and which one isn't. If I remember correctly, though, this is a Latin American instrument. That is a YouTube. Well, you know what? That YouTube video kind of works. We're going to pull this up real quick so y'all can see this. So, let me try that again. This instrument right here is made out of wood. I think traditionally they are, but I have seen plastic ones, and it has ribs down a side, and you'll usually take just a wooden stick. Actually, you can see the stick in his hand, and you can tap it and get a nice hollow tapping sound. You can run it down the ribs and get this constant clattering sound, and we hear a lot of that at the end. There's one instrument though that is a bit higher, and it's the same idea. I think it has a gear in it and it clacks against it. Anyways, it's like a little stick with a mechanical device on top, and you spin the stick. Well, you rotate the stick and it causes the device to spin, and there's some sort of ribbed element in it, and it creates a clacking sound. I don't know what it's called. I don't even know how to search for it. But that was definitely in there as well. We heard that a few times. And like I said, it's very likely there are quite a few other instruments in there that are along the same lines, the same type of family of this ribbed percussion that wasn't necessarily a güiro. Maybe. But I definitely heard a lot of these, and I think it's interesting because it brings that industrial sound that Autechre was using, that really harsh, repetitive, metallic sound in their music here in an acoustic way. And I think that's very cool. And to me, it also just speaks about the ear of the arranger. They heard something in here, they're like, okay, we don't necessarily need this as often, but we do want to pay homage to it. This is a key element of the ending to this track, is to create these glitchy rhythmic patterns. Well, do we have an instrument like that? Yeah, we kind of do it. It's not a one-to-one translation, but we are getting a lot of really quick percussive hits in this, and it kind of has that same sort of glitchy sound. Um, and like I said, it's not one to one, but it is sort of analogous. I just love that, especially panning it all over the place, and bringing in what seems to me like different instruments in this ribbed family. where they all have slightly different timbres or tones or pitches. And so it kind of brings out some of that electronic side that was in the original into this acoustic version. I mean, it's just, at the end of the day, that's what this track is. It is a showcase of phenomenal understanding of both your work, what you typically work within your instruments, and also just being a fantastic arranger, understanding what the original artwork is and how best to translate it to your style and what your goals are through the translation. And I think that's a really important aspect that gets overlooked often is the goal of the translation. I think sometimes people just do unplugged sets because that's sort of what you do in rock. You have acoustic sets. But that's not a really good reason to make this change. And that also usually means that the transition from electric to acoustic doesn't usually end up in something that's different or even better sometimes. It's just another version. It doesn't really stand on its own. It's sort of just the unplugged version. And it's because there was no purpose to the arrangement. And to me, that's one of the things that sets apart a good arranger from a bad one, is understanding the intent. And, well, first and foremost, having an intent. And like I said, these guys, they knew what they were doing. They knew what they wanted to achieve, and they executed it at a high level. Those are my thoughts on Alarm Will Sound, their rendition of Cfern. Let me know your thoughts. Put them down in the comments section, your opinions, perspectives, whatever. Let me know if you enjoyed this one, if you didn't, if you enjoyed my comparison. If you have your own comparison, maybe I didn't touch on something that you thought was really key to this version, or something that both of them do differently in better or worse ways. I don't know. Let me know, right? I don't know what y'all are thinking. That's the whole point of the comment section. Above the comments in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. We do have another comment request today. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow. We got 3 special selections queued up for then. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening.